Yo dog, Kenny Boucher here, Next Level Painting, hitting you up on the literal best of all days, coming to you from that beat slab in Hollywood, California. We're doing it again. It's been a long time. I shouldn't have left you without a dope beat to step to. Today, we're doing Mortarion. We're all nerds here. We all have almost an identical story on what led us to this hobby. And I imagine most of us have faction loyalty. NWO for life. Been a fan of the Death Guard for a long time, right? Faction loyalty, chaos all day, every day. Nurgle, Death Guard. The Daemon Primarch Mortarion has a model, and I haven't painted it yet, right? It's been out for a couple years. I didn't jump on it very deliberately when it first released because there was already a lot of content out. As a content creator, I need to also think about things, things like that. And my passion has gotten the better of me in these times, and I have to paint Mortarion. Also, he's got new rules, so I'm going to date this video right now. 9th edition Death Guard Codex is dropping, right now. Literally right now. So I have preemptively struck, and I have put together a video, and I'm not going to lie to you, it's like a fucking hour long. So sit back, strap in, let's go on a journey together. Mortarion. I'm going to show you guys the end of the video at the beginning of the video because I'm a marketing genius. Here he is. My sun and my stars, the Daemon Primarch of the Death Guard. Drama, contrast, clean edges, crisp execution. There's a lot of tactics that go into generating a paint job like this. It's not as much raw skill as you guys think it is. There's a lot of techniques, a lot of tricks of the trade. One might even say it's secretly easy. So let's buckle up. Let's go on that journey right now. Now you'll notice mine is converted. Shout out to Eric on Instagram. Hooked me up with a dope conversion, and mine is all pre-assembled. This might not be the easiest thing for you. You might want to leave the wings off, but we're going to go through that journey right now. I'm going to use black, brown, bright, warm gray, and of course the bright yellow green for my original Death Guard workup. And what we're going to focus on is nice, even coats. We're going to lay this brown down, completely encapsulate this model in brown because brown is the best color. There's some science behind it, but I'm not a scientist. So, the goal is just lay the brown down, guys. Nice and easy. Airbrush Kung Fu. In the Next Level Painting 101 curriculum, all journeys begin with the airbrush, but they don't end there. You can use the airbrush at any time. You can come back to it. You can just put it down for 1 second, do something with a paintbrush, come right back to it. I'm gonna show you some of those techniques for saving time and getting smoother coats. Here we go, guys. We're about to deploy the airbrush again. We're gonna use it in an order that may surprise you. So I'm gonna grab some dark purple. That's kind of the traditional purple of my Death Guard project that I've been working on. And what we're gonna do is just carefully spray all of his robes with this purple. We're gonna try to control it. We're going to try to be as accurate as possible, but it's not a problem if you get this purple on the brown. Remember, brown is the best color. There's lots of reasons for it. One of them is that pretty much every color just sticks to it. So normally I like to build my values up, slowly nurture the highlights, but right now I'm treating this as a straight raw base coat. Kind of like when we sent the brown right over the black, I'm setting the purple right over the brown. It just sticks, okay? I don't know why. I'm not a scientist again. So now that we have all that purple down, let's just go back to the brown and let's cut some of the purple off the brown again. Just back and forth, back and forth. It's okay. Okay. You don't even have to fully clean the airbrush out. There might be some residual purple still in there, right? I didn't do 100% clean. I did the hobo fling 90% rinse. And now I'm going to just kind of cut out some of that overspray from the purple. I do this all the time. I try to come up with excuses to use my airbrush for longer, generate smoother base coats, and it is nothing to just keep wiping out overspray with the airbrush, generating some nice smooth laydowns and saving some time. I know now that that purple is up in the nitty gritty, it's up in the recesses, and it's looking smooth. Now that we've done all that, it's time to do the armor workup. Now, I do have a 3-piece workup I've been using on my Death Guard project. It's all about tying in themes, okay? And when I say theme, I mean colors. What are the fucking colors, right? So back in the old Death Guard 101 batch painting video, we were using black, brown, bright yellow, green, and bright warm gray. That's our mix. That's our workup. Something dark, something bright, and a kind of a hue, right? To make it interesting. That's my Death Guard style. So now we're going to go on that journey. We're going to budget real estate and work our way up to those highlights. It's time to start generating some drama on the real estate on the armor panels. It's a pretty simple workup, guys. We have dark black brown. We're going to add some green to it to kind of greenify the brown and also brighten the value. So that way we can start generating some brighter points, and we're just going to start aiming. We're going to get our airbrush in there. We're going to respect the values by only adding a little bit of green to it, and then progressively we'll just kind of keep adding more, and then eventually some of the light warm gray, and just kind of keep pushing that drama. Now, what I try to suggest to people is when you're doing this, you get to kind of decide how much of that brown to leave intact, how much of it to wipe out. If you just primed it brown and then green and then, gray, you wouldn't be budgeting any real estate for your transitions. And transitions are sexy. So I'm deliberately not wiping out all the brown. I'm leaving some intact, leaving some behind. Kind of how much you leave behind kind of determines how dramatic a piece looks. So I usually sit on that drama side. I like to leave a little bit more intact than the average painter. So now as we're building up our greenish browns, we're going to start moving into brighter and brighter territory, usually using the exact same mix already in our airbrush. We're going to add a little bit of that bright warm gray to it. You see, it's going to add some value to it. It's going to brighten it up a little bit. Maybe a little bit of green back in there. Maybe that was a little too far. I just use my artist eye, kind of just feel it out, try to respect the values, throw a little bit more flow improver in there, try to lower the opacity because the airbrush is about coverage, not opacity. I'm going to stack it slowly, really thin, and I'm going to just get really tight. If you have an airbrush that has a throttler built in, that can be helpful. You can kind of lower the PSI or throttle it, which I prefer. Get even thinner on your mix. And you can really just nurture these flawless transitions out. And again, budget real estate for that drama. Okay. Just keep working your way up, bouncing around, getting into a tempo. You never want to see the paint deploying wet. That means you got to get better at pulling the trigger back. There's really only one moving part here, guys. It's pulling that trigger back. So the better control you have there, the more control you have over that moisture. So I never want to see the paint dripping, getting too wet. If you're sitting in one place too long trying to chase opacity, you're doing it wrong. Remember, you see the shift, hit it, quit it. Just keep moving, stay in that tempo, and go back to a place you've already done if you need more opacity, because in this situation, more opacity equals brighter, right? Because it's no longer being informed by that darker brown green underneath it. When you keep adding those sheets of glass, stacking them on top of each other, it's more its true self, which is brighter and brighter and brighter. Speaking of which, let's throw a little bit more moisture in the pot, a little bit more bright warm gray. Let's keep respecting the value, keep working our way up, generating more and more drama, sexier and sexier transitions. Once I feel good about the mix, do a couple of practice sprays, I'm jumping back in. I'm going to get even more laser focus. If before we were shining a flashlight on the model, now I'm shining a laser pointer at it. Just deliberately aiming at some peaks on the armor. I don't really consider where real light comes from. I like to imagine my models are at the showroom floor at the Lexus dealership, just lit up, looking sexy. I don't give a shit about light. I'm not a light scientist. So now I'm feeling pretty good about these transitions. It's getting really sexy. But you don't want to get hypnotized by the airbrush. Airbrush hypnosis is a real thing. So what I'm going to do is go back to the brown real quick, because you can go in any order you want. And it's such a big model that I can step back to the brown a little bit just by adding some more in the pot. And I can kind of sneak the brown back in over some areas that I felt like my highlights were encroaching upon, and to send a slight, very transparent filter over those areas to kind of subdue it. Now we're going to hop in on those wings, okay? Every model's got a focal point. It could be the big ass shoulder pads on a Space Marine, big ass plasma gun, whatever it is. Mortarion's got them wings, son. So as part of getting battle ready, we can spend a lot of time on the wings, and then we can use shortcuts like the 101 system on the armor, right? If we can just get the trim done, maybe some wash, it's fine. It's going to look great and clean on the tabletop, but as long as those wings are popping, it's going to look great. So I suggest trying to focus on those elements, right? Like if you're gonna save time and you're trying to get your whole army out so you can play this weekend, you don't want to sacrifice the end result. So use the system, use the curriculum to build upon itself, but pick something on the model that you can use your airbrush, maybe spend a couple extra hours on, and then, get into the nitty gritty with your paintbrush and make it just undeniably stunning while the model's kind of like chilling, waiting to get those other highlights, right? The other next level processes. Let's start setting up the wings. Treat it as black and white grayscale. Think of the dark brown as black and a little of that light warm gray as white. You just kind of mix them together, make it kind of a monochromatic brown, and we're just gonna start painting the wings to this eggshell white. It's a setup for the obviously fire ass wings I did before, but you know what? You don't have to do that. What you need to focus on is nice, thin, low opacity passes. Build up your opacity with multiple stacks, building it progressively brighter in the areas you want as you go. By keeping it super thin like this, it'll withstand any grain and it'll look its best. As you can see, we've got a pretty good result. I say it all the time on Twitch. Painting is two things: opacity and moisture control. So having said that, we got to approach these wings to maximize our saturation. Now that's a bunch of fancy art bullshit. What I'm trying to do is make them yellows pop. Okay, so we got to thin our paints down. We got to manage the opacity, generate a higher level of saturation in the yellows, and then back to that airbrush kung fu, work backwards, right? Normally we're always like laying down the dark stuff, working up. But I've learned through experience that when you're trying to maintain that warmth, that saturation, sometimes you gotta go backwards, and that's where your control is gonna come in, but more importantly, your ability to lower the opacity by adding moisture to the airbrush, and then staying in control of that moisture with finger control. An order that may surprise you. While those wings are drying, I'm gonna go back and cut the overspray out. Okay, I'm being efficient with my time. Remember I said it was nothing to wipe the overspray out, so we're using the same purple we used before. And I'm just gonna carefully, like pretty medium level thinness, a little bit of moisture, I'm gonna go in and wipe out the overspray. And since we already laid the purple down, all up in the cuts nice and deep, this is really easy to do. If it was already all just painted and we had overspray everywhere and we had to generate all this purple, like all these base coats with a paintbrush from stock, that would be obnoxious. But since my model's already assembled, I can't leave any of these parts off. This is the correct order. While those wings are drying, I'm gonna go through, wipe out some overspray, be efficient in the Beats lab, and just make it happen. As you can see, we've locked it all in. It's nice and crisp. It's looking its best. And now that can dry. That can take some time to dry. So back to the bright warm gray. Let's jump back to these wings and let's start making them their brightest self. And now that we've respected the values, we've worked our way up to the bright warm gray, you can see how much brighter it is than that other monochromatic off-white. It almost makes this look white. Now, you could let your wings be white, okay? I just recommend having like a brighter wings if you have like a darker model. Just think of contrast, very basic. The dark stuff is dark, the bright stuff is bright. And when you look at the model, can you see a clear and defined difference between the sections? And a lot of time that just comes down to, paint washes and edge highlights. Now, speaking of going to white, I am gonna actually introduce bold titanium white because it is important for this effect to make sure your whites are opaque. So multiple passes, stack it together, get that opacity, then we're going to be set up to do what we need to do. Time to pull out the golden yellow, guys. So when you're trying to get that heat, that flame, super warm and saturated, this is the order I recommend going in. Now you can build your browns up, you can build your oranges up, your reds up, and then try to settle on yellow, but at the end of the day, you're going to have to sneak some white back in and then reapply the yellow to maintain saturation. There's a bunch of art terms floating around, like desaturation, things like that. I'm like I said, I don't know what that even means. All I know is I get a more popping yellow when I do it this way. But the problem is you have to go backwards. Okay, now we're going to go make the dark things darker in reverse order. Normally I like starting dark. So now I'm going to grab orange. This is my favorite orange. This is Infernal Orange. Formula P3, shout out to Privateer Press. I'm gonna mix some in my pot, like going backwards, right? So we're gonna respect the values in reverse. And now I'm gonna kind of just aim with low opacity, try to keep my control tight, and I'm gonna try to make there be shadows up against the veins, up in the wing arm, the little, the thing that supports the wing structure. I'm just gonna start making the things that seems like they should be shadows this like slightly orangier yellow, okay? And then just like when we go with our highlight game, we just keep going brighter and brighter. We're gonna keep going darker and darker, but in this situation, darker means more orangey and more reddish, right? And that's how we're gonna maintain that saturation, making sure that yellow is popping. And we're just gonna try to stay in control, maintain our opacity, keep it low. Therefore, we have to control our moisture. Now I'm gonna introduce some bold pyro red to the mix as I, have now creeped more orange in. And again, we're gonna keep it low opacity. We're gonna let it mingle with the orange. And we're just gonna build our stacks, right? And no one pass is actually opaque. They stack together and generate opacity. And then they're all informing each other in nice, clever ways. Now that I feel good about, all those beautiful flamey oranges, I'm gonna go back to the yellow because I don't think it's popping enough. And I am gonna throw a little white in there, which is kind of counter. It may desaturate the yellow a little bit, but it will make it brighter. And I'm okay with the tips of these wings maybe not being as saturated as long as they're brighter and they're popping, because it is nothing to maybe go back in and filter these areas down with a little bit more yellow if you don't like the results. And this shit is so crazy that I have to basically turn the lights down so you could actually see it without like it just glowing. This is basically me in the dark right now, like trying to paint, and while these wings are just taking all of the color information from the world around them, just basically glowing. And so you can see here, I'm just basically sending a little bit more yellow back into it, just resaturating these pieces of real estate. I'm feeling pretty good about it. We're gonna jump back to the robes now. And we're gonna use a term I like called brute force. We're gonna brute force the laydown process. It's gonna look a lot like wet blending. Wet blending is pretty much high opacity, high moisture, right? Painting is just kind of two things. So I'm gonna keep it kind of thick, kind of heavy, but moist, so I can push and pull the paint around and kind of brute force some blends in. Wet palettes come in real handy for that. Using my Redgrass Everlasting Wet Palette in this section of the video. It's time to pull out the old wet palette, guys. We're gonna start laying some paint down. We're gonna be jumping around. This is the nitty gritty. This is the fun stuff. At least for me, airbrushing lets me get to the fun stuff faster. So I'm gonna kind of lay down all the colors I know my project requires. It's been applied to multiple models. It's my army's theme. We've got like a magenta, reds, the browns, the purples. We already used black just in case, sky blue, transparent blue, dark blue. These are kind of the colors of my corruption throughout my army as a theme. So I like to use these anywhere kind of like where I feel like it's kind of like a fleshy bit, or maybe like kind of a demonic infiltration. And I'm trying to keep it kind of short and sweet. It's a lot of tactics. I don't like having like 1,000 different colors laid out, especially when I have a project I'm trying to keep sustainable, okay? Sustainability is the name of the game. So I'm using a combination, again, brute force technique, kind of opaque, kind of wet. I'm laying down a combination of the darker blues, kind of where I think they need to go. And while they're wet, I may bully in highlights as I go, but I look for that one and done coverage, guys. A little bit thicker, a little wetter, kind of just push it around. Use a big number 4. I'm using the red handled igniter from Monument Hobbies. Love this brush for my laydown. And I may use a smaller brush to dial it in closer in the details, but for the bulk of the real estate, I'm going to be using a bigger brush. I'm going to be using light brush pressure. I'm going to be trying to be tactical about my angles, but a big model like this doesn't always make it easy on you. So you just got to do your best. Try to brace your hand, use steady brush pressure when necessary, but mostly it's all about like a light touch. You see right here, I'm just going to introduce some of the brighter blues, still some of the darker blues, and it's just 3 different blues on my wet palette, so it's never really that confusing. I'm just kind of laying them down, using moisture to let the capillary effect kind of swirl them together. It's a very brutish, kind of heavy-handed wet blending / wet glazing technique for building up a little bit of bonus highlight as I go. Lay it down, like I said, kind of high moisture, high opacity. It's not really a wet blend because of how much moisture I'm using, so I like to call it wet glazing. You see, it's pretty easy to do. You do a few stacks. It's very similar to airbrushing, where we're laying down something semi-transparent, pretty wet. Then the way we're going to control our moisture is by spreading it out with the brush. You see, now we're going to introduce some of the dark purple here, just kind of brute force some bonus transitions in. It's literally just the magenta and the dark purple. It's really easy, 2-piece. You never have to worry about matching it because it's always the same 2 paints, dark purple and magenta. So we're just going to go through and bully some of these bonus transitions into the robes. lay it down semi-opaque and wet. You see where you think the highlights should go, and you're not even really concerned with the smoothness of the transition. I'm looking for like smoothness of paint. So I have a lot of paint on the model. I'll use a lot of moisture to smooth it out, a lot of brush pressure to transfer it around and just keep it smooth to the touch, but just keep my transitions at least reasonable, right? Because I'll use the airbrush later to smooth anything out I don't like. This is just gets a lot of that work done in advance. Gives you some intrigue, kind of leaves the real estate open. And this is why I made sure the purple was there ahead of time. Makes this whole process easier if there's already a base color. I'm going to start taking some of these robes to red. Really simple. They're dark purple. I just added red to the dark purple, so it's like a reddish purple. And now I'm doing the same thing. I'm just laying this right over the purple. It's going to kind of easily stick, easily blend in. I don't even have to completely paint the purple with this because the dark purple is a reasonable shadow color to this new red. And then we'll start doing it again. Add some of the pure red to the tips, use a heavy amount of moisture with a lot of opacity and just swirl them together. Respect the moisture, let the blends occur, use a light touch, manipulate the fuzz zones, like the little areas where they're trying to blend. You want to just have a light touch, more of a stippling motion there. But like I said, at the end of the day, if the blends aren't flawless, that's fine. Just make sure your paint is smooth to the touch. Just keep moving around. Let's make all this stuff brute force this new red real quick. Just bang it out with your big fat number 4. Move quick, fast, and confident, and stay busy in the beat slab, knowing that we can pull the airbrush back out at any time to smooth anything out we don't like. But what I'm trying to do is generate some contrast here, trying to take some of these robes away from the purple color. And we used, again, brown and purple as a strategy to get to this red. All right, here it is, back to the wings, that focal point, right? So we're gonna sink some hours into this element of the model. We're gonna be utilizing all sorts of techniques, okay? Edge highlight technique, paint wash technique, and I'm gonna show you exactly how I approach those problems and how I solve them on the model. What I try to focus on is not battling on the physical risk of the model. I have the battle on the palette. Okay, I'm gonna show you how that works right here. In the same line as everything we've been doing, I'm gonna have to go through the veins. I made a conscious decision after looking at pictures that I gotta paint the veins. A lot of people avoid this because it is a lot of work. I consider just painting this all, taking my time, and then just saying, hey, look what I did. But I'm showing you the system right here, okay? You're laying down a dark blue, transparent blue or dark blue, Monument Hobbies Pro Acryl, okay? And then you're going through our highlight process. We're using more of an edge highlight strategy here where I'm not really blending the highlights in. I'm starting with the stock dark blue. And then I'm going to go through on the points, progressively adding more and more of a highlight, just like we do with everything. And I'm just going to just drag some crisp lines on everything. And then I'm going to get brighter and brighter, moving eventually toward the pure sky blue and just laying down some abrupt, strong highlights. It's a lot of time. This is the tedium of the project, but these wings are the focal point. You will be rewarded for this process. Pin wash. Okay, I'm gonna say it again. I'm gonna say it 100 more times. Okay, so pin washing is a technique. It's not a product. Washing is a technique. It's not a product. Some products exist that make it easier, and I will use them when I want to. A lot of times though, when I'm doing like a nice, beautiful transition using a lot of pop and saturated colors, I might be fucking around with the product. I'm gonna be pin washing, putting the wash exactly where I want. And washes, to me, are semi-opaque. And remember, semi-opaque also means semi-transparent. See, there's a lot of gray area there. So I'm gonna keep it semi-opaque and relatively high moisture. So it's kind of in between. It's not that opaque, it's not that transparent, it's a little wet. And what I like to do is use the exact colors that I've already used in the real estate of the model to shade them. So I always know if I used this dark blue, this medium blue, and this highlight blue, I know that they're all on the model with my sexy transition somewhere, and one of those colors is the appropriate color to darken the recess while respecting the values so you don't have that sloppy, shitty pin washes that just look like crap, right? This is a lot more respectful of the real estate and a lot more natural, and you're gonna have a lot more success with this. Pin washing as I see it. Pin washing can be a product, can be a technique. GW always does it, and they always use a product, but they don't do any transitions. They don't do those exciting blends. So the real estate for our models go a lot of places in value. Always respect the value game. And you see what I'm doing here in the wet palette is I'm creating the value game on our wings. Some places are dark red, some places are in the middle, and some places are yellow. I want to pick, based on the real estate I'm in, something more appropriate to help mitigate the fail rate of abrupt, stainy ass lines. So I'm going to make my wash myself. Washing is a technique, medium to light opacity with lots of moisture. I'm using my artist eye, looking at the real estate I'm in, deciding what part of the journey this real estate is and what would be a more appropriate and safer version of those 3 paints I picked for that real estate. In the darker areas, it'd have a little bit more red in it. In the brighter areas toward the tips where it gets more bright, it might be more of the softer yellow with just a little orange in it. So I just look at my wet palette, look at the colors, and I kind of just mix them on the fly. I have the battle on the palette, never on the model, using medium moisture, medium opacity. Everyone rolls their eyes, they hate it. Look, what I suggest is getting equally comfortable with all the techniques, like airbrushing, edge highlighting, washing, everything, glazing. I don't care if like you're a 2 out of 10 skill level, like in your own mind. If you're a 2 out of 10 skill level across the board and everything is equally, comfortable to you, you're never gonna roll your eyes again and be like, I gotta edge highlight. It's all the same. They're part of painting. Edge highlighting is about maxing out your opacity and minimizing your moisture, right? The maximum opacity will help it pop, one and done coverage. The lower moisture will help you stay in control. I'm gonna show you how that works right here. Remember guys, washing is all about making the dark stuff darker. So we gotta edge highlight too. We gotta make the bright stuff brighter. The first line of sharpness is making sure the shadows are even darker than they once were, generating more sharpness to the human eye. We got to do this now with edge highlighting, which is kind of the opposite, right? Like it's about as much opacity as you can get away with as little moisture as you can get away with. I like to use the tip of my brush. I like to go in very tight, control my angles, but it's the same philosophy as in respecting the real estate, the values. Some of these little holes I'm under highlighting in his wings are way up in the bright areas, so I'm using my more bright mix, right? That's the yellow we use with some of the white. In the darker areas, it might be some of the orange with some of the yellow. Just respect the real estate, respect the values. Your highlights are gonna look better, cleaner, with a better fail rate mitigation factor. Let's start getting this model ready for that tabletop. We're gonna start cutting in the trim. We're gonna be using certain brush strokes, better vectors, try to mitigate the fail rate. You do wanna paint by numbers now. A lot of our techniques so far have been just like about getting it down, only being precise when we have to, like we did on the wings. This is one of those moments. So let's cut that trim in. Let's be very careful with it. I'm gonna be using a special blend of metallics that I've been using as a theme throughout my army. It's time to jump in on that armor, guys. I've been using a blend of colors, coppers, bronzes, light bronzes, golds, dark silvers. Here's the situation. Metallic paint, it's just paint with glitter in it, okay? So what I'm looking for here is kind of a desaturated brownish yellow. Okay, so that's why I selected all those colors. If you want to see me go into more detail on it, check out the 101 Death Guard video. But all you got to know is I don't see them as like metallics. I see them as a color, and the things I would do to darken the color and push and pull it are the same. The dark silver is basically gray. It desaturates the bronze, which is brown, the copper, which is kind of like yellowy orange. And what I'm doing is I'm creating a color similar to Deathless Metal, which is one of my favorite metallics from Privateer Press. It's a P3 formula. And we've been using this consistently as a theme throughout our Death Guard project in 9th edition. So what you're doing is you're mixing it up on your wet palette, just make it slurry. It can be a little inconsistent. It's the cool thing about these metallics is like sometimes they're a little darker, sometimes a little brighter. I'm just mixing them as I need them, keeping it loose, just flexing, you know what I'm saying? So once you lay it all down with heavy opacity, lots of moisture, keep it smooth, kind of one and done coverage, I'm letting it dry and I'm gonna move on to his chainmail. I'm just gonna go back to that dark silver. I'm gonna just lay it down. The cool thing is I'm just doing kind of like a light dry brush almost, like a really wet dry brush, because the chain links are kind of purple right now because of, airbrush steps. But if I kind of just directionally pull and scrape some of that dark silver down on them, they look fine. Now, I'm going to take my time to cut out some other details, like just some basic browns. Look, dog, literally any brown in your game, okay? Pick it. But here's the thing. I specifically like to use a dark brown. I like to add something in there to make it brighter, but also to flip the hue. So for me, I'll pick any random dark brown, and I like to start introducing ochres to it, or yellows, or ivories, or both. I like the way that looks. So that's how I look at my browns for my bone protrusions and stuff. Okay, we're gonna keep it busy, guys. I'm jumping around and we're cutting the details in and we're staying busy in the beats lab. I'm gonna take that bright green. I'm gonna thin it down, lower the opacity. Gonna pull some of the moisture off the brush, and I'm gonna lay down a quick filter on this guy's face. Okay, it's just a quick snapshot. I'm like, hey, this face, which I love, by the way, would be nice if it was green, right? And as I look at it, I'm like, you know what? No, I gotta shift it, right? So I'm gonna do a couple of passes, make it a little bit more green. And then I'm gonna go back to the bone protrusions. Like I said, I'm gonna introduce maybe some more ochres, some ivories, but at the end of the day, you probably have a couple of bone colors in your collection you like to use. Do it. I like to mix them together. It's pretty much always the same thing for me. You know, I like mahogany, I like burnt umbers. Shout out to Monument Hobbies and the Pro Krill line, because they got most of the paints I want. So you're seeing I'm doing some brute force wet blending again, where I'm just making sure the tips are darker because they're bone, right? So that's kind of like the correct way to do it. So I'm just quickly, again, doing our brute force laydown. I'm using some ivories, some ochres, some dark browns, and I'm making sure the tips are kind of brown, semi-opaque, kind of wet paint. I'm not really too concerned with a flawless transition, but what I am concerned about is that face. So I went back to the blue and I lowered the opacity of the blue because I remembered like his skin has to have more of a blue hue to it. But I was like, well, I already painted it green. So what if I glazed a little blue over the green real quick and then let it dry? So then kind of some of that green is showing through. And then we pull out our little brush and we just start kind of edge highlighting his details the same way we've been doing it. You know, add a little bit more sky blue to it, just kind of work it up, get them tighter and tighter and leave some of that like almost that aqua blue in there now from the interplay between the blue and the green. Sometimes a little bonus tidbit in a project like this, you know, like pokes out at me and I'm like, oh, this would be kind of neat. It wasn't a part of the plan. Okay. And typically I don't make plans, but when you're doing a project like a sustained army with a theme, you kind of do need a plan. So I always find it fun when I get to deviate from the plan with a little something that surprises me, a little bit of a challenge or a puzzle to solve, like his face. And now I really like where he ended up. I like the tints of green built into those blues. I'm creating some really aggressive edge highlights. I like how he looks like the Scream mask. I'm going to quickly go in there and dot his eyes with a little bit of ivory. I'm going to paint his mouth kind of just red. You know, then I'm going to introduce some magentas perhaps and highlight it, just the normal colors we've been doing. I'm going to take that same bright green, lower the opacity. I'm going to glaze or almost like lazy pen wash around his eyes with the green. I'm going to let it get on the blues. Maybe his eyes are glowing now. And it's almost the same methodology behind the wings. I made his eyeballs white and then I just glazed some green in around it. And it's kind of like a free bonus OSL effect. Super easy, super ghetto. Just like that. And so this was the part of the project, right? Like I was bouncing around and I was filming it kind of on and off. This was the fun. This was me getting to do all the fun shit, guys. And he looks pretty good right now. Washing is all about making the dark stuff darker. Okay, so now it's time to make this model look its best. We are going to be using a product, right? And I said it's not always a product, but I have a special relationship with Army Painter Washes. I love them. And I have a little bit of a proprietary blend I like from my army. And we're going to be pen washing elements of Mortarion to generate more contrast, to sharpen the image. It's time to take him to that battle ready tabletop state. Okay, guys? And no paint job is complete until you've generated some wash technique. Okay, at least in my opinion. I'm going to be using the Army Painter Quick Shades. I've got this like blend I've been using for my project. That was like a mysterious bottle with no label on it. That was basically some strong tone, mid-brown, light tone, green, and a little bit of black mixed in. It's kind of a weird combination. So as normal, the wash's job is to make the dark stuff darker. But for this project, I like the interplay between those colors I selected and his armor. So I'm going to be mostly pin washing around his huge trim features, where normally on a smaller model, I would just wash the whole trim. But I'm deliberately leaving some of that metallic intact, kind of just going around the nuts. Always wash your nuts. Lining up against the armor, trying to make sure there's a nice border between the armor trim and his armor field. I'm not going to wash his armor field. He's big and sexy enough that I don't need to worry about that. I'm going to be sending it into the recesses of his armor, into all the little pox marks and dents in his armor. And like I said, a lot of times when I do the pin washes, I've done multiple times in this video already, I didn't lean on a product. I use the colors, but I want these colors for this project. I want there to be a little brownish green tucked into those recesses, in addition to it being darker, because the primary job is make the dark stuff darker, but I get a secondary buff here where I get these nice kind of almost like corruption tones to these pre-selected paints. So the Armor Painter, in my opinion, makes the most versatile set of washes in the game, because of the way I can mix them together. They're a little thicker so they can cling to softer shelves, but I can thin them down with a little flow improver. So still at the end of the day, I'm looking to have a semi-opaque, wet finish, but I can kind of push and pull that seminess to different directions. And now I'm going to lay some heavy wash down on his staff. Now this version of my mix is a lot of brown in it still. Now I want it to get a little darker, okay? Making the dark stuff darker isn't just one pass. I can stack the washes as long as I was moderating the opacity. It's not really thick and gunky. I do a lot of thinning here. I'm gonna green it up and blacken up. And I'm gonna go in for a second pass. I'm gonna lay down this greener, blacker version of the wash on the weapon. I want all those metallics on that weapon just to look really fucking good. I want to jam that wash into the crevices, but I want to get this bonus staining on top of the metals that have these greens in them. But I'm still going to be in charge. I'm going to make sure it's not pulling up on the big flat areas. I'm going to be wicking it away from smooth areas, staying active, staying engaged. I've got videos on Patreon about active washing and how to lay it down hard and then use more of a stippling stroke versus a traditional brush stroke, and just push it and pull it and then kind of move it away from the flat areas you don't want it in. Staying engaged. Now I'm going to go back to this blacker and this greener wash and do kind of a second round of pen washes in certain features I want to be sharper, okay? I want there to be some more sharpness between this trim and this shoulder pad on these money shots, these big focal points. I'm not going to like necessarily redo everything, but I am absolutely, whatever I look at and I scan with my eyes that I feel like could have more contrast and have more darkness sharpening in it, I'm going to go ahead and do another second quick pass there, stacking a little bit more green and black into those pieces of real estate to sharpen the image. Now this is all in pursuit of battle ready, guys. This is that tabletop finish. I would put this on the table just as is. He's beautiful, he's sharp, he's got some bonus blending in the robes, his wings are looking stunning, guys. Look at this, man. What a beautiful workup. Now we can actually pursue that next level. Mortarion is in his battle-ready state, by my personal standards, right? We did clean transition with the airbrush, locked in those details nice and clean, crisp washes, solid. We spent some time on the wings as a focal point, but you can apply this concept to an entire force. You can get them battle ready, tactically, and then in your spare time, you can kind of just pluck models off the shelf and take them to that next level. So I'm gonna leave you guys here, Mortarion's battle ready video. Now, obviously you can see through the clips in this video that he's done, and he's at a higher level than where he is right now in this journey. My patrons over on Patreons pay my bill, so I give them more value. Not gonna lie to you, it's just business, right? So if you want to see the extended cut, it's already out. It's on Patreon. It has many more minutes of content that are going to be utilizing some more wet blending techniques. We're going to be using the airbrush again. We're going to be deploying other advanced techniques to get Mortarion beyond battle ready. We're going to take it to that next level. Thank you for supporting me here on YouTube. I truly appreciate it. Please find me on Twitch and consider supporting me on Patreon. As always, play on, players. If you like these tutorials, check out Next Level Painting on Patreon. Become a patron of the arts today. We offer early and exclusive access to our videos and a rewards program for different pledge levels. Patreon is PayPal and credit card secure, so you don't have to worry about that. We use 100% of the money to improve our process.